IVM.
Welcome to Aneesh Thing, and today's episode is actually very special because we complete 50 episodes. That's 1 year of podcasting. I don't know how this has gone by. I have my producer here, Saurabh. He's smiling because he's seen me fumble from 100 times to perhaps 10 times now per episode. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and I actually want to talk a little bit about why I even started a podcast. And my idea was, and this is super inspired by this book called Steal Like an Artist, which is that write the book you want to read, make the movie you want to watch. And for me, the podcast was about that. Can I create the podcast I would want to listen to myself? And long story short, I reached out to the IVM team. I think initially they just were obliging me by saying, okay, let's do this, but give us a set of 40-50 episodes. And from there, it's been quite a journey. I still remember recording the trailer of the podcast, and both Saurabh and Kavita were like, Aneesh, just smile more, show more emotion. I was like, this is all the emotion I have. So it's been a great journey, and what I'm doing for this episode is I'm actually going back to a few conversations which vary again from food to relationships, different subcultures. And I think these are not only very interesting conversations that I've had, but also they are very diverse conversations. So we'll take a short little break and we'll get back to the episode.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus is joined by celebrity photographer Avinash Gowarikar. They talk about his career and how Amir and Salman Khan played a huge part in it. They also go head-to-head over their cricket knowledge of the West Indian squad of the early 80s, Sunil Gavaskar, Sachin Tendulkar, and many more legends. On Aneesh Thing, Aneesh celebrates 50 episodes of his show. To mark this milestone episode, he takes us through some of the best conversations on the show so far. And on The Habit Coach, Ashton shares how one can cultivate the habit of stillness when there is chaos in life. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcasts.com. We have some exciting stuff for you. Follow us on social media via IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, please spread the word. Tell your friends and don't forget to rate and review them wherever you're listening. You'll also find all our shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Cash Free Payments and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you for making this possible.
Welcome back to the 50th episode of Aneesh Thing. Like I said, this is going to be a recap episode. And actually, the first episode I want to talk about is the first episode of the podcast, which is about coffee. And I was very careful about titling this episode as well, because the title is You Should Love Coffee More Than You Love Food. And the whole idea here was that coffee it's a food product, it's a fruit. And the moment you look at it from that standpoint and that aspect, you then realize that black coffee doesn't have to be that bitter, hot beverage we've been having. And I'm not talking about coffee from a functional point of view, from a caffeine point of view. I'm actually talking about it from a taste point of view, because that is what coffee is for me. It's just a really beautiful, tasty cup of beverage. And that's what we talk about in this episode. We go from again, looking at coffee as a fruit, how to brew coffee, and why you should stay away from French presses. I personally hate French presses. I think that's where a lot of coffees go to die. And these are some of the things we discuss in the episode with Rahul from Subco.
Coffee is a fruit. So it's always really important to start with that fact, because that sets a certain framework for how you understand something that you've never understood quite as a sensory experience before. It's something that you've always understood as something that comes with milk and sugar or chicory or not. But if you scale that idea back and you say, okay, coffee is a fruit. I mean, it's a berry or a cherry, depending on how you want to define it. And it grows on a tree, and it's beautiful when you see it. And I know Aneesh has seen the farm level recently, I think, or maybe even before that, a few times. Yeah. Awesome. So it is a surreal experience when you first encounter a coffee plant, because coffee has, in a way, the sort of pre-third wave, and we can define this as well. Do you want to
Absolutely.
Yeah?
That was one of the points.
Okay.
We will talk about the waves.
Okay, we'll talk about the waves soon.
Although these days waves are different things, but we will talk about the coffee waves. And then coming to filter, which is my preferred way of drinking coffee because it's so approachable. You can even do it at home easily.
Sure.
Let's talk about the Kalita, the V60, and the pour over.
Sure, yeah. Me too, first off. I love filter. I think, these three methods are good ones to kind of discuss. I think, I guess maybe we could start with the AeroPress.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And in a nutshell, they're all doing the same job. They're basically taking your ground coffee, your roasted ground coffee, and you're adding hot water in one way or the other and
Correct.
giving it time to extract.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other comment, so yeah, that's completely correct. I think one of the important bits is, why is it called filter? Well, there's a paper filter, in fact, involved in ensuring your grounds do not go into the ultimate coffee extraction or liquid. Hence, filter as a term utilized. So whether it's a V60 or a Kalita or an AeroPress, there's a paper filter present. Those of you who have brewed with those methods. So yeah, as Aneesh said, the principles are pretty similar. I mean, you have ground coffee, ground to a certain size in terms of surface area, and then you have a certain temperature of hot water that you might want to put into that coffee, certain amount of time you might want to brew it for.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of similarities that go between them.
Yeah.
I'd say the differences would be fundamentally, I mean, there are different ways even to brew with an AeroPress. There's many.
That's another rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole for sure. So I'm not going to go into that. But typically speaking, an AeroPress is somewhat more like a French press style of brewing, but like a lot better. Whereas the V60 and the Kalita are brewing methods where you're kind of slowly and steadily pouring water through kind of either a cone or a flatbed filter within which there is coffee. And as you pour, the coffee extracts as you pour, right? Meaning you're pouring water on top and then you're slowly seeing coffee come out the bottom, ready to drink. Whereas in the AeroPress, there are various ways to do this, but typically if you kind of invert your AeroPress, and that's how I brew it and that's how I'd recommend people to brew it, the coffee's not, it's not extracting in real time.
Yeah.
You're giving it about anywhere between a minute and 3 minutes to sit in that AeroPress chamber, and you might stir it, you might not, there's various ways to do it, but at the end of your brew cycle, you then flip it over and then you plunge it, and that's where your brew comes out.
Moving on from coffee to relationships, and again, super interesting thing, episode number 5, we speak about non-monogamy. Actually even spoke a little bit about kink, but coming back to non-monogamy, how non-monogamy can also be non-sexual, which is something, again, fascinating. A lot of times when people are talking about non-monogamy, which is polyamory, and E&M is another term, it's usually considered to be sexual. And we just got into so much about relationships in this episode, which were new to me. A lot of concepts that on one hand are very familiar to us as Indians. On the other hand, it's just sounds so bizarre sometimes. So we get into discussing polyamory, non-monogamy, and one thing that really made an impact from this episode for me was that jealousy is a fear, it's not an emotion. And again, very interesting take, never looked at jealousy like that. So this is episode number 5 with Ailey. For a lot of people, I think just being with one partner can come with so much issue about how much time you're spending and all of that. The moment you don't have multiple partners, I think everyone will have to be super strong emotionally and mentally, right, to actually sustain in this lifestyle.
I would not say strong. In fact, emotionally strong is the opposite. You have to be emotionally vulnerable.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah.
I never looked at it from that point of view.
Yeah.
Do tell more.
Emotional strength is part of a toxic culture that believes that emotions are bad for you. My school of thought is that emotions are beautiful, all the ones that make you feel comfortable, which is your joy, happiness, love, and the uncomfortable ones like fear, sadness, and anger. So, there are only very few emotions that exist, at least on a dictionary of emotions, and then from there's a spread of multiple, nuanced version of anger, for example, irritation or sadness, etc. So, emotionally vulnerable And also, you have to look at how emotionally reactive someone is. So polyamory is not for everyone. Now, how do you regulate your emotions? Okay, so there is emotional reactivity and emotional regulation. One is a skill and one is a personality trait. Now, the knowing how to react to emotions or having a way of feeling them, expressing them, and then just being okay, and not holding on to them is a skill that you learn. And a lot of polyamorous people, are advised to go through certain, trainings or whatever, like at least inform themselves about these things. Reactivity, again, is something that you can manage or you can learn about, but it's always with the help of a mental health practitioner to support. Now, once you have all these emotions, yes, you're right. More people, more emotions. So if you're averse to emotions or you're afraid of them and you see them as a weakness, then perhaps polyamory is not for you. Perhaps you want to practice some other kind of consensual non-monogamy, or maybe you want to practice non-monogamy, the non-consensual one, because you can't deal with things, right, or the emotions of your partner. So, polyamory is not for everyone. You need to be able to understand your emotions better. You need to learn skills to regulate emotions better. And often when we think about emotions, we think of jealousy. Okay, but jealousy actually, when you break it down, stems from 3 core emotions, which is again your fear, sadness, or anger. How you address these things, like how you get jealous, what is it that you're afraid of? Do you feel disrespected? So if you feel disrespected once, but you actually know that your partner is not disrespecting you in life, this is just this instant, perhaps it's something to do with your childhood or with experiences in your childhood.
Episode number 48 with Hustle Rani on how to grow your Instagram actually caused quite a stir on our social media. So again, fun episode. I did not understand the outrage a lot of people had because of us dissing the Wes and us dissing the Wes Anderson trend. In fact, let me correct myself. Me dissing the Wes Anderson trend. Hustle Rani actually saying no, let people do what they want to do. And I was like, no, people should at least have some semblance of what they want to do. But not taking away from the main conversation, it was about how to grow it on Instagram in 2023, because it does get confusing, right? Do you post once a day? Do you post twice a day? Do you post reels, stories? So we get into all of this in episode number 48.
Gaslight, girl boss, and gatekeep.
Girl boss, I get.
Yeah.
Gatekeep, I don't understand in the context you're saying. Because I don't think anyone can gatekeep anything.
No, they can.
How?
They can. They're so... Like, you just have to be... Bullies were the most... Bullies in school were the most initial examples in life of people who used to gatekeep things from you. Anybody can gatekeep anything. Like, people not inviting you to their birthday party is them gatekeeping you from being invited in their group. Gatekeeping is like a very day-to-day act of rejection. But on the internet, it's like, you also having a very particular opinion on... Not everybody's getting the Wes Anderson reel right.
Yeah, of course.
Like some of you haven't watched a Wes Anderson movie and it shows.
That's what I said.
Putting out a fiery tweet and just shitting on other people's takes. See, that's gatekeeping. Now, if that's a good gatekeeping, bad gatekeeping, that's your decision to make.
To me, that's not gatekeeping. To me, that's saying that just do some research. Watch one movie. Watch a YouTube clip.
Gatekeeping a trend. Like you're trying to preserve its dignity. That's why it's gate-kept, But that's good kind of gatekeeping.
Like what we said, I would want Wes to... It's a homage to him, right?
Yeah, and a reaction video from Wes Anderson on reviewing how badly his style has been butchered would be great.
So, why I put out this, just for context, I put out a Wes Anderson reel. That reel did decently well. And then I was seeing a lot of other stuff come from India. And to me, it's not like that Wes Anderson reel took hours to make. It literally took no time. I genuinely was going for a shave in this village I was
always the
at.
reels that don't take much time to
Right.
make.
My only thing was I'll carry my tripod with me because I want the camera stationary. I just told the babu one thing: keep looking in the camera once in a while and don't smile.
The deadpan.
That was it.
Yeah.
Right. Rest I put the camera stationary, whatever. Nothing. 15 minutes of editing and you're done. But if you've seen Wes Anderson, even if you've seen one Wes Anderson movie, it's not about the filters or
The fonts.
the fonts, right? It's about composition and it is about storytelling. And to me, the thing was that most people didn't do any storytelling. It was just selfies with a filter and music. That's not Wes Anderson. That was my point. At least tell a story. Story could be crap, no problem. That's subjective. But you just putting your face is not Wes Anderson. Then episode number 3, which is about why all pizzas are not created equal, was with one of my favorite people in the city, Alex. Now, Alex also happens to make, according to me, the best pizzas in the city. And we just talk about pizzas for a good hour or so, out of which 20 minutes went into speaking about dough. And when I was asking him about how he goes about his pizza dough, where does it come from? I was expecting that it'll be some Italian flour from some particular mill. And he's like, no, dude, it's maida. It's local Bombay maida. And the idea here was that whatever Alex does, he's adapting to what's available locally. Apart from tomatoes, which come in a can from Italy, and he explains why that's actually better, everything is adapted with local ingredients. It's a very tasty episode. You will get hungry listening to it.
You know, I think you speak to anyone that bakes bread in this country that isn't a flatbread, or that isn't like a rich bread, like let's say brioche, or you know, even pao has a lot of butter in it, right? It's kind of a rich bread. They're very difficult to make. Sourdoughs are very, very difficult, and the main reason is the protein content. And I know that there are people that, you know, source this grain, that grain, this grain, mill it, make their own blend, and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is that it will never be very consistent because there just isn't enough data on every single harvest to know, you know, whether it's moisture content or ash content or protein content, which is kind of the main thing, or just the quality of the protein itself, right? And so, you know, if you go to Europe, they have T65, T55, T45. They have all these different flours that are made for certain things. This one's made for croissants. This one's made for, you know, rustic loaves like a sourdough or something. This one's made for cakes. It's the same in the U.S. We have bread flour, cake flour, pastry flour, all-purpose flour.
We only have all-purpose flour mostly in India.
It's just called flour. Yeah. There's flour and there's whole wheat flour.
Yeah.
In all fairness, we have two. It is kind of all-purpose, but you know, I bet you if you took the average protein content in most of the maida that we get here, I bet it is not even as strong as all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour, I think, has like on average like 10.5 to 11.5% protein, and I think maida is usually in the 8 to 9%, which is more like cake flour.
So what are you doing for your flour? What are you using?
So I went down the path of like, I'm gonna mill my own flour. I'm gonna cheat the system, and I'm gonna come out victorious. And what I realized again is, you know, for the volumes that we use, it's not practical. And you know, I think my biggest strength and why, you know, I've been able to be successful as a chef in this country is because I'm able to keep things consistent. I don't really care to say whether I'm a great chef or a bad chef or the best chef or the worst chef, but if I'm bad, I'm consistently bad across the board. It's the same bad food that I make every time. And I think, you know, because the ingredients here are so difficult, they can be so difficult and they can be so inconsistent that you have to kind of adjust yourself. And so actually in working a lot with breads here specifically, and like fooling around with sourdough, we kind of just found the flour, the regular maida that we like, that is the most consistent in and of itself. And it is a very low protein flour. It's nothing imported. It's local, and because we buy so much, they basically mill it and then send it to us, so we get nice fresh flour. And I think the advantage of that is that, okay, fine, there's Italian pizza flour. Now they're gonna mill that, who knows when. They're gonna store it in some silo. Then they're gonna pop it in a bag, and they're gonna put it on a barge or a boat or whatever. And then it's gonna at some point land up here, and we have no idea what the storage conditions will be like. And so we have no idea really, not only how it's been stored or if it's gone rancid, because it's very easy for these things to go rancid. We also don't know when it was milled as compared to when we got it. So then the chances of it actually having any flavor, right? It's like, you're not going to grind coffee today, keep it like in the back cupboard somewhere, and then make a cup of joe like in 3 months from now. Like, it's blasphemy.
Another really fun episode and something that's really close to me is watches, and that's what this episode was about. And watches as a hobby, or horology as a hobby, it's not necessarily about expensive watches. In fact, I don't own a single luxury watch. I think the most expensive watch I own is about 50,000 rupees, which in the watch world is really not that much. But you can have a great watch even at 1,500 rupees, at 2,000 rupees. Having a good watch is not about spending too much money. And having a watch is also not about accurate timekeeping. It's a misconception that more expensive watches will be more accurate. In fact, it can be the exact opposite. A cheaper quartz watch can be a lot more accurate than a much more expensive mechanical watch. So we deep dive into a lot of, beginner stuff about watches, two watch recommendations on all budgets, including under 5,000 rupees. One of the most fun episodes on the podcast. Over to this conversation between me and Rizwan, getting into building out a watch collection. Now, I think watches can be very intimidating for a lot of people, even to start off with price points. And the moment you hear about building out a collection, people think you'll have to spend lakhs and lakhs and lakhs to even do that. Now, at least for me, when it comes to building a collection, you can do it with 2 watches, you could do it with 5. But your basic 3 styles, at least for me: dress watch, a sports, like a diver, one fun, random watch.
Correct.
What would it be for you?
So when it comes to a dress watch, right, I would go for something like a Tissot or a Casio Edifice.
Sorry, in this I don't want to get into brands, but
Okay.
I want to get your view. Like, would you do the same thing?
Okay, that way. Yeah. Correct. So when it comes to watches, like you said, like you rightly said, a dress watch is extremely important for someone like me.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Who is a professional, right? So I need to have the dress watch on me through the day when I'm working or when I'm attending an event, right? But the fun part, the diver's watch, is something that is inherent to me because I come from a sports background, and most of us, I think, when you're not working, I think it's great to have a sports watch or a diver's watch on your wrist. So that is something which most boys would probably understand, that that little chunky watch on your wrist.
And that's also what saved the Switch watch industry. Just going back to the whole quartz panic that the industry had because of the Japanese. The steel sports watch is what also saved the Swiss watch industry. So
it has absolutely.
A little more stylish, a little more sporty, essential in your collection.
Yeah, correct. And when it comes to a fun watch, I think it's a mix of, again, both for me. There are some dress watches which, something like a collaboration watch. Where, say a Timex coming up with a nice fancy collaboration with a Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And that's a fun watch for me. I wouldn't wear it through the year, but once in a while I would like to have that.
Even the Timex does the Pac-Man watch as well.
Yes.
And that's a fun watch to
That's
have.
a fun watch. Or for that matter, a smartwatch is not really a watch, but I would put it in the fun category if I really want to.
Actually, that's true.
Have a fancy dial, which I can keep changing.
I'm assuming you have a couple of Garmin's, or like, what do you run with?
I run with a Garmin because when it comes to running and GPS, I think it's the most accurate, and the kind of data analysis it gives you is fabulous. So the Apple Watch is nowhere close to it when it comes to that category.
Would you ever wear it if you're not running?
I do.
Yeah?
So what happened was, recently I got the Garmin Forerunner 255, which has so many data points that you need to have it on your wrist for at least 7 days to understand what data is it giving you. And the good part is the battery life is like about 10 days.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of used to having that watch more as a health monitor on my second wrist. So I'm still wearing a watch here, and
You're doing the 2 watches?
I'm doing the 2 watches just to get the data,
Okay,
but not like...
That's another thing in the industry. A lot of times you'll see people wearing 2 watches, which you can pull off in certain aspects.
Yeah.
But sometimes people...
No, this is sometimes I'm just hiding that second watch because this is just to get the data going on my watch so that I can see what happened in the last 10 days.
Yeah.
But that's just for like understanding, how does this work. But I wouldn't do it like on a regular basis.
Cool. Let's get to some price points and watches that you and I would recommend under certain price points. So starting with 10,000 rupees or below. Your picks.
My pick would be the Casio Oak, the G-Shock Casio Oak, but I was pretty attracted to the black color. So that is what I recently bought.
So
in that category.
Casio's on my list as well. This is the Casio 2100, dubbed as Casio Oak because it looks like a royal oak from AP, which would be 100, 200, 1,000 times the price. This is a watch that it became so popular in the watch enthusiast space.
Yeah, and no one imagined, right?
Yeah.
That the kind of demand it had when it launched. And Casio Oak is just a slang, right? I don't even know the model number.
So the model number is 2100.
2100, yes.
You can look
correct.
that up.
But Casio Oak is what it's called on the street.
Yeah.
So
they started with the black watch, then they introduced red. There are some 10, 11 colors now.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the black was selling at a premium when it launched initially.
But in India, all of these were at a discount.
Yeah.
I got mine at a discount in India. So I got the black and the red, then I interchanged the straps. And right now there's a black iridescent dial which looks really, really cool. But there are some 10, 11 colorways right now. These are under 10,000 rupees. Also, these are all watches that we're talking about, which if you were to wear in a room full of watch enthusiasts, everyone would understand it.
Yeah.
And it would be a cool watch.
They would still respect you for the watch you're wearing because this watch has a story, a legacy behind it. Yeah.
So Casio, I think, can be on every list possible. The other Casio for me, which is really interesting, is the F91W, which is the most basic digital thin Casio. Like when I say Casio on that watch, you imagine this is the watch I'm talking about.
This is the watch I was wearing when I was in school.
Yeah.
And I'm still wearing it. So
1,095 rupees, 10-year battery life.
Yeah.
Also dubbed as the terrorist watch because a lot of terrorists use that to make time bombs. Cheap, efficient, reliable. But if you were at a really, really cool event with great single malt and cigars, like I'm going as cliche upmarket as you can think of, and you were wearing this Casio, which literally cost 1,100 rupees, again, it would be perfectly cool.
It'll be perfectly cool. In fact, there are a lot of watch pages that, put pictures of, watches spotted on celebrities.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, this watch that you're talking about is featuring like very frequently. If say a XYZ Hollywood celebrity is wearing this watch, it's there on that page, spotted wearing this. So there's that value attached to that watch.
And under 10 grand, I don't know if you own any HMTs, but for me, HMT is a big brand to get into in that price point.
I used to have an HMT. I'm talking about like 15 years back. For some reason, I don't have that watch anymore. But back then I did have an HMT, which I really used to like sort of like and I was attached to.
So HMT started in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
Collaboration between the Indian government and Citizen. So basically getting Japanese know-how. You can still get their mechanical watches for about 3,000 to 4,000 rupees on their website. And you can get an automatic Saurabh, which would be my recommendation for automatic. That's around 8,000. So their manual ones, which is Janta and Kohinoor, very popular. You get several colorways. 3,000 to 4,000, Saurabh 8,000 to 9,000. Made in Bangalore mechanical watches and those price points. Crazy. Episode 29 was actually with my mother. So Mama Bhasin was on the podcast. She's a hypnotherapist. This episode actually has performed really, really well for us. It's one of our most watched episodes. And we talk about hypnosis and hypnosis related therapies as well. And again, really fascinating conversation. So I've grown up listening to a lot of these kind of conversations at home. And the first time I heard about hypnotherapy, I was like, wait, my mom's gone a little cuckoo. This cannot be right. What is she getting into? But I've been healed with hypnosis and again some alternate therapies. This includes a constellation therapy, and it's just fascinating, honestly. Till you actually go through constellation therapy, you cannot imagine how it can even work. Logically, it makes no sense. But yeah, we speak about hypnosis, a lot of misconceptions around hypnosis, and now it can heal you in episode 29. Over to the episode. What about relationships? And with relationships, I've gone through some therapies which are more to do with constellations. Is this a good time to even touch on that?
Yeah. So, family constellation is also a very good process in which, see, I'll just explain it to you.
Yeah.
So, we are all born in a family. We all have parents, we have siblings, we have grandparents, and we take our family for granted. And then we also have our own interpretations about each family member. It may not be the truth, but it is our own interpretation. So we go into all these interpretations that are our own interpretations, and we reunite people. And family constellation is something which is, everything is related to the family. The way you are brought up, the way that is a foundation of whatever you're going to do in the future. Your future, your happiness, everything depends on that, on the family. So even though it's called family constellation, it can be done for organizations, it can be done for a table, for example. I'm so attached to my table that I can't let go of it.
Who's attached to their table?
Yeah, people are, you'll be. I know of people who are even attached to their broken bottles. And then you find out that actually it is some family member who reminds them of that table. So they don't want to get rid of it.
Fair.
And in family constellations, what happens is that it is a surrogate form of therapy. That there will be a bunch of people who are strangers to the client. And yet, when they are made representatives of the client's story, they enact out the whole story for the client. Now, I only know what I'm thinking. Okay? But I don't know what the other person in the relationship is thinking. And all that comes out into the open. And it is a thing where, because when you do therapy, the client may still try to hide things. But here it's out in the open, strangers are saying this. Of course, many times people say this is not the truth or something. It's okay if they don't want to listen to it, but that is what the field shows up. So, remember we did a constellation for you.
So we've gone through, I've done a constellation therapy 3 times now, but I'll actually talk about the last one.
Yeah.
I'd gone to the therapist I see, and she was like, how do you feel? And I was like, I feel like I have 3 balloons on top of my head. And she's like, okay, describe the balloons more. And I was like, there's red, white, and red, black, and white. So that day we tackled 2 of those, and the red one was left. And this is all done. 1 month later, I'm doing a constellation therapy with her, and like what you said, right, this is surrogate. So you're watching this happen, and there are other people playing you. So now my therapist has asked someone else who has no clue about me, who has no clue of my past therapies or anything. And she's like, how do you feel? And she's like, I feel like I have a red balloon on top of my head. And that was just freaky, right? How can this be this accurate? Another episode with a lot of drinking and fun was episode 14 on rums, and how rums can be a lot more complicated than whiskey. And this was with Arijit and Dimi. They are literally rum encyclopedia. So we actually geek out quite a bit. But we talk about how do you even classify rums, right? Because you have one way to classify rums is your white, dark, gold. But even in white rums, depending on where the rum comes from, whether it's from Barbados, whether it's from French Indies, it can taste very, very different. So we really geek out on rums. We also talk about daiquiris and why mojitos are still cool. What about some classic cocktails or easy to do cocktails at home people should do with rum?
I think, for this one here, I think that the first thing that people can do, just get some lime, get one lime, get some sugar syrups, put 10 mils or half a shot. I would suggest for people to put crushed ice on as no, because with this short story, a frappé is fantastic. What is a frappé? A frappé is get one lime, get 10 mils of sugar syrup, put a large measure of rum, get some cracked ice, put it there, and there you go. Simple. You don't have to be complicated, and people will really see that this becomes eventually, a rum that they rely, because even with that, the characteristics of the rum will still shine.
And you can sip it slow. There's no stress. It's how rum is supposed to be: relaxed, easy. Think of the Caribbean. Sit down on a beach chair.
A rum frappe. We had quite a few of these a few days back. So that for sure.
You don't even want to do that much work. I mean, Coca-Cola is interesting, but also a lot of us have stopped having cola because of the sugar element of it.
I would suggest the Swami 2 Cal
100%.
Cola works great with rums.
I just learned how to plug.
Yeah.
This is a joke at multiple levels. The 2 point is awesome. Ginger ale, ginger beer, what Swami is doing. But having said that, I know you are accepting this, like Ginsberg has a nice ginger beer or something, right?
Yeah.
So all of those with rum will go really, really well. A little bit of ice, but make sure you always have ice. Right? We are drinking it this way because
soda. This is great with soda.
Oh yeah, we were having this with soda.
With soda, simple, Yeah. So you have two options. People will drink rum with Coke. If people don't have rum with Coke because it's too sweet, soda is a great substitute.
Yeah. I think rum soda, especially with this short story white rum, really tasty.
Yeah. I mean, and also like if you're home and if you want to go a little bit fancy, it'll seem like I'm going nerdy, but it's not, right? So one of the best things to make with rum is punches.
Yeah.
Right. You have 7-8 people coming in, don't want to work too hard. There is a calculation. In fact, there's a poem that existed. It was taught to me by a guy called Richard Hunt, which was 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, 4 of weak.
Yeah.
So that's a small limerick. Can we call it a limerick? I don't know what it is, but it does exist, which kind of gives you a imagination of what the measure is.
So say that again.
1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, 4 of weak. Weak is either water or soda or sparkling wine or tea or whatever's available to you.
Or ice.
Right? So now you get a little bit of lime juice, right? Whatever amount, right? If you have a glass, like this small glass, get at least double that amount of sugar syrup, right? Or sugar that's available. You don't want to go that sweet, reduce it. You can always balance it later. Dump in a full bottle of rum inside. Don't have to think too hard. There is rum. You can keep it back in the fridge. Then the last part, just put some spices in, which in India is easily available. Get a star anise in, get a cinnamon in. Don't do dagar fool and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, feel free. But spices that we understand. And make your own tea. Whatever tea concoction you have, maybe use a Twinings Earl Grey, forest berry teas, whatever's available. Just make like a quick half a liter or whatever amount of rum that you put in. Just put it with ice and let it sit for a bit. Garnish it with slices. Just pour it in a small glass.
Throw in some fruits.
Easy. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed episode number 50, our recap of some of our most fascinating conversations. Do comment and let me know which were other episodes that you really enjoyed. And I also want to tell you that we are going to take a little break on the podcast. We are going to take a little break to figure out a little bit of polishing, a little bit of refinement. And I think we all have worked hard for a year. A little bit of break is not bad. But when we come back, there'll be small refinements here and there, a little more polishing. And of course, a lot more niches and subcultures. But we will be posting a lot of content from these 50 episodes on YouTube and Instagram. So stay tuned.